the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm now joined by old friend, and he's an old friend now. Like, we've been doing this for years. The coach, the head football coach of the Maryville Rebels. It's Derek Hunt. Derek, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm awesome, Chase. Thanks for having me back, buddy.
Thanks for being back, man. Last year was good. Do you still feel pretty good? You're like 12-2, perfect in the region. Obviously, we'll get to the Alcoa game in the regular season, but by and large, a great season. Reached the semifinal against Oakland. I mean, when you look back at the 24 season, you're like, that was a good year. That felt good. I'm glad to. Obviously, you won a state championship, but that was a good year.
It was a great year, man. We had such an awesome senior class. I mean, there's just so many good kids in that class, and you build. What's tough is you grow so close to them over 4 years, and we had a few coaches' kids in that class, so you watch them grow up, out there on the field at practices, when they're little, and so that's always tough. Would have loved to have won a championship, with coaches' kids. We've done that in the past, and it's super special, but. Man, that was a great year. We had two blemishes to two fantastic football teams, played some really big games last year, won some big games. It was a phenomenal year. We had a really good football team, and we're a couple plays away from being either undefeated or playing for a state championship.
Did it feel like that going in just because of how heavy your senior class was and what you thought you had going in to last year? You're like, oh, this could be a title team. This is a really good situation we're walking into.
We knew that we were going to be better last year than the previous year. So in 24, probably than we were at 25, and only because we had more experience. You can't coach experience. You just got to get it. And so we knew we were going to have a good team. But you never know how good, because you don't know how good everybody around you is going to be until you get out there and go. But when we beat West, I think it was week 4. When we beat West at West, and kind of convincingly. I mean, West is
back-to-back state champs.
Yeah, back-to-back state champs. Coach Brown, in my opinion, sets the bar in this area. He's phenomenal. And always puts out a great team. So anyway, when we went on the road and had a big win that night, I felt like, okay, maybe if we continue to improve and continue to gel and mesh, maybe we'll have a chance at this. So, kind of had an idea then that we were going to have a good year.
When you think back to questions you had going into the year, what was the biggest one that you were pleasantly surprised? You're like, I don't know, because you kind of talked about it, like you kind of see other schools around you as measuring sticks, but for your own team, what did you see that was answered early on that you're like, okay, this is going to be good?
I think receiver probably. We had so many question marks at receiver, and again, it came back to experience. We didn't have much experience. But we had some kids step up big time. Casey Cobble, I think, led us in touchdown catches and probably yards receiving. Colton Faust. So Casey Cobble was our quarterback the start of his junior year.
Yep.
And broke his collarbone twice in that season. So really didn't play anymore after the third game. So we're bringing in, Graham Coulter, who's a junior at the time, and then Will Jones, who's a freshman. And so they kind of shared the role in 23 on the back end of 23, and then 24. So we're starting a sophomore quarterback, Will Jones, who had a phenomenal year. But receiver, Casey moved from quarterback. Colton Faust was a rising sophomore. Britton Barrett had some experience, and then Nolan White, who played safety, but he hadn't started at receiver yet. But those 4 kids were amazing. And, we changed up some of our passing game stuff to try to fit who we were a little better. And I just think we couldn't have been happier with the results that we had from the adjustments and the way the kids worked. And they did a great job of understanding what we were trying to accomplish. And we just kind of got better at our craft as the season went along.
I remember us talking in 23 about the injury situation at quarterback, because it was just kind of like you didn't want to be in that situation to put a true freshman in that kind of spot. But now that you're looking back on it, or 2 years later, and it's like Will Jones has a lot of experience under his belt now. I mean, do you look back and you're like, it wasn't ideal at the time, but now we're going to have this kid who's just going to play so many snaps for Maryville football, and it's just someone that you just know extremely well and is got a bunch of in-game experience as you're starting as a true freshman.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. Anytime you're playing a freshman anywhere, I don't care how talented they are, there's going to be growing pains. I mean, it's a freshman, and we're talking 6A football.
Mm.
You know, you would expect some freshmen to start at really small, maybe rural schools. You know, that there's only schools that I'm talking have 100, 200 kids in the building. Well, they're playing freshmen. You know, they don't have a choice. But at Maryville, you know, we're in the biggest classification in the state, and you know, we have 140 kids on our roster from 9 to 12. So, but we have a separate freshman team, so they don't ever play varsity unless they have to. But they had to that year, and or we felt like at least maybe he deserved a shot. So, but yeah, there's going to be growing pains, but you're right. There's a delayed gratification piece to it because it's going to pay off down the road, and maybe make him a little bit wiser as he goes into his junior year, which is hard to believe. You know, he's just a junior now.
Yeah.
But I mean, to think about, he's going to be a junior going into this season, and he's already got 21 starts under his belt. That's crazy. And he'll definitely leave Maryville High School with the most, I would imagine, you know, barring anything crazy happening, he'll have a chance to have the most games played or games started at Maryville High School. I don't know how many freshmen have started throughout the years for all 4 years, but he'll have a shot at that just because of how good he was early on. So hopefully he can continue to improve and stay healthy and stay hungry. But I'm not worried about him staying motivated. That kid's he wakes up and he's wanting to get better.
It's kind of funny too, right? It's just modern coaching. The big challenge, and I think in the portal era, just in the college ranks, is, I mean, Rick Barnes is doing where you're reloading with veterans. It's hard to acclimate those freshmen because it's a give and pull where like the expectations are the expectations, but then other people want you to develop and rebuild, and like fans love Zakai, but Zakai, those are kind of rare. Those 4-year guys, and he had to learn on the fly. He wasn't a starter right away. He had to develop. It took time. But there are some that come in, like you said, and they're ready. Like they can play and they can help. But you're walking that fine line of like there's just no substitute for in-game experience. There just isn't. Like it's just with quarterbacks. You ask any quarterback in the NFL level, it's like, I mean, Peyton Manning talked about this, where it's like, yeah, I had an awful rookie season where we went 3-13 and I threw a bunch of picks, but I don't go 13-3 the next year if I don't get all those games under my belt and to see what it's like. And it's so interesting to juggle that with different rosters. And I think for you in particular, you talked about just the numbers y'all have. Like it is, I'm sure, something that you probably have to consider a lot of just like, yeah, this guy is super talented, but he's a freshman, sophomore, whatever. He's learning. But it's also like, man, it'd be good to let him get some real game reps with Maryville football with some other great players who help things, right? Like that's the other part of it is like if you're a young player and you're playing around a lot of juniors and seniors who can help slow the game down for you. Yeah. That's also a benefit too. So it's like you don't want a super young team altogether. You don't want to like it's so interesting to me in terms of team building and just coach. It's almost like just coaching management and how you juggle this concept, right?
It is, and you know, and one of the things I think that's, you know, not necessarily different, but well, it is different. We feel like at Maryville, we coach our freshman team just like a varsity team. You know, it's the same coaches. It takes a whole lot more time and commitment and some long Monday nights because that's when they play. But that's how we treat it. So we have our own freshman team who's playing as many games as possible, hopefully at least 8, sometimes up to 10. And then we have our own JV team, which is basically sophomores, maybe a few juniors that aren't starters, and have a whole nother JV schedule. And it's our same coaches coaching basically 3 different football teams. So you got a varsity, you got a JV, and a freshman. And the whole goal is to get them experience. That's it. The only way you get better at football is by playing football. You know, so we can watch it and they can talk about it all they want and they can lift all they want. But at the end of the day, we got to go play football. And so that's what it comes down to. That's what it's all about. And you know, we'll see how we'll see how it goes. But you know, who knows? We could be playing some more freshmen this year.
You never know. Have you done anything different this offseason that maybe you learned last year that kind of you're like, oh, that was something that we tried and that worked, or different things that you're like, just different coaching clinics, advice, or anything like that that you're doing a little bit differently going into the 25 season?
Yeah, good question. We're always trying to stay ahead of the curve and learn new stuff. Whether it's for me early in my career, it was all scheme. I just wanted to divulge in as much X's and O's as I possibly could. Um, but the last couple of years, I've focused a whole lot more on the team aspect and really the whole program at more like looking at the big picture more, not just the culture, which is super important. And that's one thing that I really enjoy trying to work on and figure out the chemistry and the culture, but also just the efficiencies that we have and the processes that we have and our practice plans. And, how can we try to be more efficient, even in our freshman Thursday practice, freshman Monday, just little things, just dialing it down all the way to the small details to try to figure out the most efficient way to develop kids, develop football players. And then, how we do leadership trainings in the off season, and, we're fine tuning that piece all the time. Coach Kenny Cobble leads that, does a great job. But we all get to be kind of guest speakers to them. And I really enjoy that. So, there's always ways that we're trying to stay ahead of the curve, and I'm trying to learn something new. But you find this out when you get into football is, you don't have to invent anything new. You just learn from other really, really smart coaches. And sometimes it's another high school coach. Sometimes it's a college coach. You don't really have to go to clinics anymore. When I first started coaching, early 2010s, I think 2010 was my first year at Maryville, but, that's all we did was go to clinics. That's where you learn. But very, very shortly thereafter, it got to the point where, you can get on YouTube or have a subscription, to Glacier clinics or Nike clinics or whatever, fill in the blank. And you can watch all the X's and O football you want, schematics. You can get film for every college game, every NFL game. You can watch anything you want. And so it gets to the point where there's really not enough time in the day to consume all that material.
Yeah.
And so I fell into that trap, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where I was watching so much film, I don't know what I was actually learning. Was I actually doing something that was going to help Maryville football, or was I just trying to, learn the game more? But I guess in some ways it helps. But at the end of the day, we're still coaching high school kids. So you got to make sure it applies.
It feels like you've made the full transition. It's like the balance between being an OC and being a former player, and you just love the schematic stuff, but like part of it is just like, I'm the CEO. Like I'm the guy who has to wear all these different hats and maintain the program. It's hard, right, to go from coordinator or to just full on CEO. It's some guys, it's just they're naturally CEOs. Others, they're more scheme guys, and they rose the ranks because they're really good at calling plays and really good at that sort of thing. But if you want to be in the top chair that you are in, like, being a CEO is part of it. And I feel like you seem a lot more comfortable with the CEO part of it now.
Yeah. Listen, there's no part of the game that I've done that I didn't like. So when I was just starting out coaching the quarterbacks only, I loved every second of it, and really you grow close to your position players. And I still am involved with the quarterbacks a whole ton. That's where I spend my time in practice, obviously. But yeah, as a head coach in any sport, you got to do a whole lot more than just go out there and coach. You got to fundraise, and you got to, sometimes you got to deal with discipline. You're going to have to talk to parents, whether you like it or not. You're going to have to work with administrators and, other coaches. It's, and then you're planning your whole season, your whole year of football, and really every sport nowadays, it's year round. You have an in season, but your off season is just as busy. I swear, I tell my wife all the time, like, we are way busier in the off season because there's not really a routine. In the season, you're really spending more time, obviously, at the field in the season, but at least you have a routine, and But in the off season, we try to do all these community service events. We've got special ed football night. We've done a couple camps. We have workouts. For a couple of weeks, we may do some conditioning with the whole team in the mornings before school, which I love, getting up in the mornings with those guys. And the whole time we're doing that, you have spring sport guys coming and going,
Mm-hmm.
so they might be there for a little bit and they're going to baseball or whatever, basketball, wrestling, whatever the case may be. So it's just hard to keep up. At least there's
Yeah.
a routine in the fall.
Especially because you got a lot more kids than a lot of other schools have to keep up with. Like
Yeah.
it's just it's a bigger deal. If you can go back and tell yourself one thing based on what you saw from the 24 season and like before week 1, what do you go back and tell yourself about, like, hey, just as a heads up, this is how this is going to go in 24? What's the one thing you wish you could tell yourself?
So go back before the first game of the 24 season.
Based on what you saw, everything.
Yeah, honestly, and this probably isn't what you want to hear. It's not meaty enough for you, but it's true. I would go back and just tell myself to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because so much, man. Like obviously there's pressure. I think anytime and I don't want to act like high school football is way more important than it needs to be, but it's super important, and I think people at Maryville love it, and I loved it and grew up in this place, and so I understand the importance of it. But at the same time, it's still high school football. But if I could go back and tell myself one thing, it's like, hey, don't forget to enjoy this season, because this has happened to me a few times. I'm a nervous wreck every week because we're playing big games every week. Call it 2019, 2020, 2021. We've had some really good football teams, and you get to the end of the year and you're like, man, that was a lot of fun. I wish I'd have enjoyed it more, when we're in the middle of it, as opposed to just looking back and, telling good stories about it. I spent way too much time worrying and, what if in it to death. And part of that's just the nature of the beast. Part of that's what makes you successful as a program, is trying to figure out all the scenarios. But we just had such good kids this past season. And, I definitely enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong, but I wish I could have probably slowed down a few more times at practice and soaked it in. You know what I mean?
On the football side of things, though, I'm curious, like, Alcoa and Oakland, both one possession games, really one score games. At the end. Was there something that they both attacked that you just didn't have an answer for? Or were they just completely different games that there was different circumstances as to why you think Maryville wasn't able to come out with a victory? Like, what did you make of the differences and similarities between those two losses?
Well, two complete different games. Alcoa was back and forth, and God, what a great game, man! They always are. It doesn't matter what Maryville has, what Alcoa has. Any given year, it's going to be a battle, and I just think, buckle up, because it's
there's just no way around it. They can move up like they are this year, and it's going to feel the exact same.
Oh, they're unbelievably talented every year, and they do a great job out there. Kids play hard. I hope it's the same thing that a team would say about us. Kids are going to play hard. They're lined up, play hard, well coached, all that stuff. But that's what Alcoa is, and that's what the Maryville Alcoa game has become every year. It doesn't matter, who may have the upper hand personnel-wise. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to one or two plays that make the difference in the game, and that's what happened. And unfortunately for us, we had opportunities, and Alcoa made the plays, and those, I would call it less than 4 plays, 4 or less probably, that had a potential to change the outcome. And they made those plays. We didn't. And that's what it boils down to. 2 really good football teams. You could have probably flipped a coin, in that game. So, but credit to them. Hats off to them. As far as the Oakland game, that was a tale of 2 halves. It wasn't necessarily back and forth. I felt like we had all the momentum in the first half and executed our game plan really well. We had a couple tough plays in the first half that prevented us from being what I thought would have been up 21 points, at least 14 for sure. And instead we go into halftime up 3, versus being a couple scores or even up 21, which honestly we had the chance to do that. But you get into the red zone, you got to score 7. You can't kick field goals in big games like that, and expect to, lock yourself down. Yeah. So I credit to them. They came out in the second half and made some adjustments and played really hard and made more plays. And then they found ways to get loose offensively. I thought their defense, they played their guts out. Probably one of the better defensive games we've played in that game, and had some kids step up big time. But, credit to Oakland and their staff. I mean, they're obviously successful for a reason. So they did a great job. That game was a tale of two halves, though.
Yeah.
And in the fourth quarter, it just got away from us, and it was hard for us to keep our composure and make enough plays to stay with them.
It kind of reminds me of the 23 Bama Tennessee game on the road in Tuscaloosa, where I think Tennessee wins that game if they go up 3 scores instead of 2 at the half, because they were in the red zone and they just were settling for field goals. And it was one of those where I remember telling my wife, I'm like, that you're close, like, because I just think it's a different feeling coming out of the locker room if you're down 3 scores, even at home, than 2 scores where, I mean, they one big play and it's back to a one score game, and it's just a different environment. It feels completely different going into the locker room and trying to get those guys up, because it's just, I think it's hard. I mean, Tennessee hoops, they dug themselves a big hole here in the first half, and they play Houston even in the second half, and it just, that will be forgotten because it just didn't go the way you needed it to go for the full 40 minutes.
Yep.
But like you said, I mean, Oakland and Alcoa, like, outside of that, I mean, that's a great year. Like, it's a great year. You want to win those games. You want to beat Oakland in that spot, but it's also like Oakland's not going anywhere this year. Maryville's not going anywhere this year. Alcoa's not going anywhere. Like, those are all you might get revenge both spots this year. Isn't that kind of cool too, to think about, where it's like, yeah, these are juggernauts. Like, these are like, we're going to be in these fights again. Is that something you tell the kids of, like, look, like, it hurts to lose to Oakland in this spot, but like, if we want to get to where we want to be ultimately in 25, like, we're probably going to have to face Oakland again, and it'll be another hard fought game.
Yeah, I hope we do, because if we're playing Oakland, that means we've made it to the semifinals. So I would love to make sure they're on our schedule. If I could guarantee that, it'd be great. But yeah, no, I mean, playing an Alcoa, playing a Oakland, playing a West every year on schedule, like, we're talking about the top 10 programs in the state, year in, year out. And so that's what you want. I mean, this is what people in Blount County who are Alcoa Maryville fans, they're so spoiled rotten, the fact that they get to watch those 2 teams play. I mean, you just think about the last 30 years. Yeah. How many championships and wins, and what great football that they've got to watch, and, good for them. It's not their fault, but they're spoiled. There's no doubt about it, because that's 2 incredible football teams 5 miles apart. I mean, it's unbelievable.
We talked about the seeding a little bit, and where you'll meet Oakland potentially in a rematch this year. I mean, do you like the new seeding changes, the new playoff format coming into effect this year?
I don't really care about the seeding. What I don't care for is the travel. Yeah. Like, teams are already struggling. There's a lot of schools struggling with travel. Buses are hard. Sometimes finances aren't as great right now, and it's been that way since 2020 season. But when you're asking a 4 seed, to travel to Middle Tennessee in what's likely not going to be a great game, so now they're basically paying more. There's going to be less gate money for the home team to be made. Not that I want to make this all about money. Yeah. But I mean, here's a great example, Chase. When we host a playoff game at Maryville, the football team usually loses money. All right. So think about that. That's hard. Yeah. And here's why. Because we don't get the gate like we do for a regular season. So, you take 100% of the gate proceeds, you cut it in half, Tito Lester Blake gets 50% of it. I don't think people realize that, And then the rest of the 50%, you cut it in half again, and then you pay the other team, the visiting team. So that might cover their buses, but probably not if they're traveling outside of the Knoxville area, Probably not, because charter buses are expensive. If you take a school bus somewhere, it's a different ballgame. We try to take school buses everywhere we can. So you're left with essentially 25% of the gate. Well, think about it. If we're playing Warren County or somebody from Middle Tennessee versus somebody who is in Knoxville, the gate's going to be a lot less if we're playing somebody in Middle Tennessee, because people aren't going to travel if it's a 4-1, and you'll have your parents now. But we have played playoff games at Maryville, and I don't mean for this to sound conceited or bad at all, but it's just true. There might be 30 people in the visitor stands. You're losing. So for a football program, you're losing money, and I think it's going to be harder for some teams. And I guess people voted it through because they wanted to see different matchups. I get that. That is fun. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, we like playing different teams too, because it kind of gets old playing the same team. But at the end of the day, you know, what makes sense logistically for a 16-year-old kid?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that I think that's why I would prefer to keep, you know, the same side of the state, you know, just like every other sport does. You play your conferences, you know, then you move on. In professional, you play your league division the most, and then you move on. So that's just me. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to pan out fine.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's like the theoretical, where it's like, just if you take away the business part of it, you're like, oh, I get it. Like, you want different matchups, you want to shake things up a little bit. Like, I get all that, but then it's like you do some reporting and talk to folks, and you're like, okay, this might be more of a logistic challenge. You can't just snap your fingers and just do it. It's like the difference between the people on the ground and the people in the suites. You know,
That's right. That's 100% right. You know, so I think I know for a fact that this year we'll have home playoff teams lose money in the playoffs. And that's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow. You know, I
mean, it's just across the board, right? Fans are just getting squeezed for every last dime, and it's just traveling.
Well, and everybody almost now has a streaming service. Yeah. So sometimes it's free, Chase. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can sit at the house and, you know, drink your Diet Coke and your popcorn on your own couch and not have to move. You know, and these. I mean,
I did it for West Sevier County last year in the cold. It just like nope, it was right there. It's pretty easy. Like you said, it's more convenient.
Great. Like that's awesome. But here's the problem with that: high schools don't get TV revenue. You know, I mean, they don't. I mean, NFHS, you know, they give some schools who actually have a lot of viewers a cut, but it's a small cut.
Yeah,
like you're paying $8 a pop a fan. And that's what, you know, I really miss about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and before, you know, is, you know, everybody had to show up to the game. The town shuts down, and you know, you're coming to the game, and you're going to watch, you know, your community play their football game. That was really cool. And Maryville, obviously, we still have a great fan support, and they travel well too, which is pretty cool. But it's not the case for a lot of teams. You're looking at parents and a few diehards, and that's about it.
It's interesting because me coming from Georgia and growing up in the Parkview district, and like the way Georgia, the highest classification, like y'all are in 6A, they have it's basically all Metro Atlanta schools, so they're all in a cluster. So even if you're going from Cobb County to Gwinnett County like, it's not really. I mean, traffic is traffic, but it's not far. It's not a big ask for parents and fans to. But you do have that one group of the South Georgia schools, the Lowndes, the Colquitts, those schools, because they're just too big and too, like, they have to also be in. But it's only a couple. So it's like, if you make that travel, I mean, it's not ideal, but it's also like a big, like, everyone knows those programs and the history there and all that kind of stuff. So that's like a bucket list thing for a lot of people, because, I mean, they're like, how often are we going to have an opportunity to go see Valdosta or Lowndes or whoever down there? In that atmosphere? And if you're only asking them to do it once, like, I think it's like, okay, we'll make it a day of it. Tennessee, I found, is just so much more complicated because of the Memphis side of things, the Chattanooga side of things, the Middle Tennessee part of things. Like, it's just, you're spread out, man, and you can stretch these schools and fan bases and everybody else pretty thin pretty quickly. And I think it's a unique to Tennessee as opposed to Georgia, I found.
Yeah, and it's just a different landscape,
you
know, and obviously Georgia's got some great football teams and so much talent, especially in that, you know, that dense Atlanta area.
Yeah.
But like you said, you know, you get to the Lands and the Colquitts, and they can play football South Georgia too. So, no, it's different. I think they've got 7 classifications, don't they?
They just got rid of the 7, I think. So they're back down to 6A. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm a fan of Tennessee going back to 5 the way it used to be.
They just got to fix the playoffs. Let's get rid of the 3 and 7s and 2 and 8 teams making the playoffs. Can we do that here? Because that was one of those that I just what are we doing?
It's different, man. I would even be a fan of going to 4 playoff weeks instead of 5. You know, which will never happen. But I mean, you basically got to finish 1-2 in the region to move on. I mean, think about a state championship the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
That's the best week in high school football, Chase, by the way. Yeah. I mean, obviously getting to play for state is awesome. But when you have a home playoff game the week of Thanksgiving, because everybody's in town.
Yeah. You know, and everyone's off.
Everybody's off. Everybody's in town. And so, it is just,
Yeah.
I cherish those nights.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just so much fun, and you see, former players and friends and everything who's in town watching and want to come watch the Rebels play. So I would imagine that it's really special at other schools too that have had the opportunity to do that, and you can't take them for granted because you just never know when you're going to get back to that spot.
Final thing, we'll get you out of here. What are the spring summer position battles that you're most curious to see unfold for your team?
Well, so receiver again, fortunately, unfortunately, however you look at it. But there's some kids that I think will be able to compete for that. We lost quite a bit defensively. Lost basically all but one D-line, two of our two interior linebackers, and then all but two in the secondary as well. So lost a lot on defense. Feel good about some of our kids that are stepping in there, but certainly going to be some battles, I guess you'd say. Certainly going to be chances for kids to compete and earn positions. Same to be said, on the offensive line, in the backfield, receivers. So honestly, I think we ended up with 10 returning starters going into this year out of 22. So which is about where we usually land, anywhere from I would say 8 to 12 is about usually where we're at. A couple of years ago, I think two seasons ago, we had 3 or 4, which was a low mark for us. But we rarely ever have more than 11 or 12, because you usually have a good senior class.
Yeah. Derek Hunt, how do the good folks support Maryville football and everything you've got going on this spring?
Buy a ticket and come watch the boys play, and I not just Maryville football. That goes for every high school in the area. Make it a point to at least once a season, that there's 5 home games guaranteed for every high school football team in this area. Buy a ticket and go watch the local high school football team. It'd be great to see communities buy back into what I think is the greatest team sport that's ever been invented. And, it turns boys into men and allows them to learn life lessons that they'll take with them forever. And it impacted my life. And I was a very average football player, Chase, but it impacted my life greatly. This game did, and the coaches and people that I was around every single day. And I'm super thankful that I had people pushing me along the way, into football. And so, buy a ticket, go support your local school. If it's Maryville, great. If it's somebody else, great. Just support those kids. It's really hard, and we need to teach kids that it's okay to try to do hard things.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that, Derek. Thank you so much for the time, as always, my friend, and we'll check back in again soon.
Thank you, Chase. Appreciate you, buddy.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.